All right, so are you ready for this? This one is wilder than any true crime documentary you've ever seen.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, this is the YSL case.
Okay.
And it's got it all, man. It's got a rap superstar,
Oh, wow.
accusations of a criminal enterprise, a trial that just wouldn't end,
Mm.
and even questions about if hip hop itself was actually on trial.
Interesting.
So you sent us a video about it, so let's
Yeah.
break it down together. What are the key takeaways?
Well, I think one of the things that's so fascinating about this case is it's not just about Young Thug and the YSL collective.
Right.
It's really like it reveals some cracks, I think, in our justice system.
Yeah.
When you think about it, this trial went on for over 2 years
Oh, wow.
and cost an unbelievable $10 million.
$10 million.
$10 million. That's $5 million a year.
Mhm.
I mean, just imagine if that money was invested in community programs or legal aid for people who can't afford it.
Right, or even just like basic infrastructure stuff that
Yeah.
we really need.
There are so many better ways that money could have been used.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? It really makes you think about priorities.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we get too deep into that, let's make sure everybody listening is up to speed.
Okay, sounds good.
Who are the players in this drama?
Okay.
So we've got Young Thug, a huge name in Atlanta's rap scene,
Yeah.
and his crew known as YSL or Young Stoner Life.
Young Stoner Life.
Now, they presented themselves as a record label
Okay.
and a close group of artists,
Uh-huh.
but the prosecution painted a very different picture.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was that?
So that's where the RICO Act comes in.
Okay.
This law, which was originally intended to take down the mafia,
Right.
it allows prosecutors to go after entire organizations,
Wow.
not just individuals.
Okay.
So it's a really powerful tool, but some people argue that it's being used too broadly,
I see.
especially when it comes to groups like YSL.
Interesting.
So picture this.
Okay.
26 YSL members
Wow.
hit with RICO charges,
Okay.
facing accusations of drug trafficking,
Uh-huh.
violence,
Hmm.
the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
This wasn't just a legal battle.
Okay.
It was a media spectacle.
Oh, wow.
Like every twist and turn was splashed across the headlines.
Yeah.
Social media was buzzing.
Uh,
And it felt like the whole world was watching.
it really highlights, I think, the intense scrutiny that comes with high-profile cases, especially when you have a celebrity like Young Thug at the center.
Right.
It became a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
People were debating the charges, the
Oh.
evidence, and even dissecting the courtroom fashion choices.
That's so funny.
But beyond the spectacle, there were some really complex legal issues at play.
Absolutely. One of the biggest bombshells was when Gunna, one of Young Thug's close associates and a rising star in his own right,
Right.
decided to cooperate with the prosecution.
Oh, wow.
Now, in the hip-hop world, snitching is a serious taboo.
Okay.
It's about loyalty, street cred.
Yeah.
And it can have huge consequences, both personally and professionally. So Gunna's decision to take a plea deal really set off a firestorm.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So was he betraying his friend and his crew, or was he simply trying to protect himself from a potentially lengthy prison sentence? This case forced everyone to grapple with these questions of loyalty versus self-preservation, and it really put a spotlight on the incredibly difficult choices people face when caught up in the legal system.
Right.
It's a dilemma that goes way beyond the courtroom,
Yeah.
and it speaks to something much deeper about trust, loyalty, and the pressures of a community.
Absolutely.
So before the break, we were talking about Gunna's plea deal and how it sparked all this controversy about snitching in hip-hop.
Yeah, it really challenged like the unwritten code of the streets.
Right.
You know, for many people, Gunna's decision was seen as like a betrayal,
Right.
like a violation of this sense of solidarity.
Mhm.
But for others, you know, it was a reminder of the realities of the justice system.
Right.
When you're facing, you know, potentially decades behind bars, can you really blame someone for choosing self-preservation?
Right. It's a tough call, for sure.
Yeah.
And it brings us to another really controversial part of this case.
Okay.
The use of Young Thug's own lyrics as evidence against him.
Oh, wow.
They actually tried to argue that his music was like a confession, a reflection of real-life criminal activity.
So that's where the whole debate about artistic expression versus criminal intent gets really heated.
Yes.
On the one hand, you have the First Amendment,
Right.
the right to free speech,
Freedom of speech.
and this idea that art should be allowed to explore even the darkest corners of human experience.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, prosecutors are saying, hey, this isn't just a song.
Right.
This is a blueprint for criminal activity.
So where do you draw the line? Can you
Yeah.
really put someone on trial for their creative output?
Right. It's tricky.
Especially when you think about the history of rap and hip-hop being unfairly targeted and stereotyped.
It definitely raises these questions about bias
Yeah.
and whether certain artists are being held to a different standard than others. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
We don't assume that every country singer who sings about heartbreak is like a stalker,
Right.
or that every heavy metal band is actually summoning demons.
Exactly. So
Ugh.
why are rap lyrics being treated as if they're literal confessions?
Yeah, it's a good question.
It's like they're saying if you talk about it in your music, you must be guilty of it in real life.
Yeah,
It just doesn't sit right.
it's a slippery slope.
It is, but let's shift gears for a second and talk about the financial elephant in the room.
Okay.
This trial cost a staggering $10 million.
A lot of money.
That's an insane amount of money.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder if those resources could have been used better somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Huh.
I mean, that kind of money could have funded so many community programs,
Right.
provided legal aid to people who desperately need it,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even been invested in crime prevention initiatives.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to justify spending that much on one single case,
Right.
especially when you consider the backlog and underfunding in so many parts of our justice system.
It's like they threw everything they had at this case, no matter the cost. And
Yeah.
for what?
Right.
What was the ultimate outcome of this years-long saga, this legal drama that had everybody glued to their screens?
Well, that's what we're going to dive into in the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back to part 3.
Yeah.
We've been unpacking this YSL case, you know, from the RLAO charges to the snitching controversy and using those lyrics as evidence. It's been pretty wild, hasn't it?
Definitely a lot to unpack.
But after all these years of legal battles, millions of dollars spent, it's time to talk about how it all ended.
And you know, the ending might actually surprise you a little bit.
Really?
Young Thug actually ended up taking a plea deal.
Wait, a plea deal?
Yeah.
After they built this massive case against him, after all that media attention, everything,
Yeah.
what did that even involve? I mean, what was the...
So he pleaded guilty to 1 count of racketeering and 8 other lesser charges.
Okay,
And in exchange, he got a 10-year sentence.
but here's the thing. He got credit for time served,
Okay.
and the rest of the sentence is split between probation and community service.
So after all that, no real prison time.
Right.
It just seems like kind of a light sentence.
It does.
For a case that was made out to be this huge criminal enterprise.
Yeah, and this is where I think the whole system of plea deals gets really interesting.
Okay.
Prosecutors love them
Yeah.
because it guarantees them a conviction
Right.
without the risk of going to trial.
Mm-hmm.
And for defendants,
Yeah.
especially in a case with such serious potential consequences, a plea deal can just feel like the safest option,
Right.
even if they believe they're innocent.
So it's a win for the prosecution, but is it really justice?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. And what about the other YSL members? What happened to them?
A lot of them actually also took plea deals
Okay.
with, varying sentences depending on the charges.
Right.
Gunna, for example, was released after pleading guilty to a racketeering conspiracy charge. It's a pattern we see a lot in these big RAC cases.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot of fanfare at the beginning, and then a bunch of plea deals lead to what seem like lighter sentences.
It makes you wonder what the point of it all was. This
Yeah.
huge, expensive trial all over the headlines.
Right.
And then in the end, most of them just end up cutting deals and avoiding serious prison time.
It definitely raises questions about the effectiveness of our justice system,
Right.
whether it really serves justice or just the interests of those who can figure out how to navigate it.
So where does that leave us? What are the takeaways from all of this for you, the listener?
I think the YSL case, it's a reminder that things aren't always what they seem.
Right.
We see all these headlines and simplified narratives, but the reality is much more complicated.
Yeah, it's so much more nuanced.
It's a story about the power of the media,
Yeah.
the complexities of the justice system, and just the difficult choices that people face when they're caught up in the law.
We didn't set out to give you all the answers, but hopefully this deep dive gave you the information and the different perspectives you need to form your own conclusions.
Yeah, and remember, critical thinking is so important,
Yeah,
especially with all this information overload we all deal with.
right.
Don't just accept what you hear or read.
Right.
Do your own research. Challenge your assumptions.
Yeah.
Be willing to consider different points of view.
And that's really what the deep dive is all about, right?
Absolutely.
We want to empower you to engage with these complex topics,
Hmm.
ask the hard questions, and be an active participant in finding the truth.
Exact.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thank you.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, keep asking those tough questions.